You mentioned digital currency,
Hmm.
whether it's Bitcoin or anything else. I feel like everyone's been saying for a while, it's coming. That's going to be the new big thing.
Yeah.
Do you think COVID will accelerate something like that, or do you think we're still a long ways away from there? I personally don't see it happening that soon.
Okay, so this is what we have to describe because I like what you just said there. Like, I don't see it happening that soon. Like, how do you see Bitcoin being used, or what do you see like the value of it?
I see the value in it. I just don't think that people have. I mean, even something like, I'll give you an example, Apple Pay, right?
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
both have iPhones. I get hit the dollar sign and put five and send you $5.
Yeah.
Nobody uses it, from my experience anyway. I
Right.
think you're starting to see things like Venmo a little bit more. But I don't know if people feel comfortable or safe, making purchases online with their online currency.
So again, I guess then we'd have to still bifurcate the difference between online currency and like mobile payments and fintech
Yeah.
stuff versus like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Because I think if I dive into Bitcoin with you, I'll say that like it's a multifunctional platform that is to me almost kind of a combination of fintech and gold and also just like an insurance policy, right? Like it's like, if America and Japan and the UK and all these countries keep printing dollars and bailing people out, and like it starts to create really truly massive inflation at scale, people always will look for safe havens because you want to keep the value of your money period safe, and you don't want it to just disintegrate. So I think there's going to be a big contingent of people that will look at Bitcoin as just a completely safe haven. And then I think that there's going to be people who look at it as just an insurance policy. So as like a speculative investment, like, well, in case not only the dollar crashes, you have this asset, but also the fintech side of it can be that, when companies like Square and PayPal are adopting it and they say, hey, well, look, when you start to press a button on your phone and you're ordering something on Amazon or, anything, if pressing the button to say pay with your Apple card or pay with Bitcoin is available and they're both coming from a similar source, I don't know if the consumer will really care. Like, I don't think you'll really care where the money comes from. As long as if you have the capital there and it's allocated there and the systems are talking to each other, I don't think people will really care. So then that's the transactional side. But I mean, then there's also the side that like, and this is a pretty big one, but it's not tied to anything. That was the main point of it, was that America can't just print more Bitcoin, right? Whereas like we have to rely on Apple for Apple Pay or our banks for those things, but Bitcoin is a completely autonomous system. So that was, I think, the appeal for most people in the beginning, was that like, look, like if this country does something, like if you're a person, let's say, to use an extreme example, who has a job or has businesses or owns companies, and you're making tons of money, and this COVID time or economy hasn't affected you at all, in your mind, this is why you think, well, why is the government bailing all these people out? Why are they canceling student loans? Why are they, going to give all this unemployment, all these checks? To you, you just know that that means my taxes go up and I don't get the benefit of it, right? You go, I'm not getting a $1,200 stimulus check because I make too much money. I'm not getting any unemployment because I'm not unemployed. I'm not getting any of these things. And yet I'll have to pay for them. So that person might say to themselves, look, if that goes too far, I'm just constantly losing money. So I want to take my money and put it more into maybe into equities or to gold. And I think people look at Bitcoin as the thing that they can say, you can't control the flow of this, right? Like even like with gold, there's mining companies that are mining it and putting more on the market. With gold, with Bitcoin, there's the finite limit. So if you're that person who's looking at it as that true insurance policy, you're saying, hey, no one can affect this. There's no country that's going to come in and go, okay, we're going to start printing more Bitcoin, like, so those countries can ban it. And some countries have tried to, but it's fundamentally different than the other digital assets.
That's interesting. And it's funny because as you talk about it, I think one barrier to entry for a lot of people is just the lack of understanding, myself included. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds so complicated, and I don't understand it. And I think that's probably why a lot of people are shying away from it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's like, because look, in the beginning, full transparency, I remember I was a massive skeptic of it, and I felt like, yeah, like listening to the thinkings of the people like the Warren Buffetts who say, hey, it's not really an asset, it doesn't really produce anything. And from his point of view, that's true. It's not a business. It's not an asset that's producing something that you can value. But just like our dollar, that's that used to be backed by gold, and now it's just the reserve currency of the world. So the world's dollars are backed by our dollars. Bitcoin is dollars that are just backed by the world, right? It's not backed by anyone's currency. It's not backed by the yen or the pound or the dollar. It's just backed by us, the people. Like you back it, I back it. The guy in Yugoslavia backs it. In Africa, we back it, right?
Right.
So we're basically saying, hey, we're putting our funds and our capital into this system, and no one controls it. Whereas before, it's like we're putting our funds into the system like a bank, and then they go, oh, hey, by the way, your deposits is too low. We have to charge you a fee to like maintain this. And like when you look at those numbers of people who have whatever it is, like less than a few $1,000s in their account, banks are charging them 20 and $30 a month or something
Yeah.
just to service this stuff.
Oh
So
yeah.
when you think about that, you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. If I already have very little money, this bank is coming in and changing the rules. Or if you were doing fine in 2006, 2019, and the world kind of collapses, you go, well, why am I paying for all these bailouts? Why am I paying, So something can happen and then completely affect you. Whereas Bitcoin, it's like things can happen to affect the price, of course, but no one's controlling it. No, and that's what I think people like is the safety. Now, again, to your point, the utility and the real adoption will come like it is coming where, companies like Square and Cash App and PayPal and all these different things like Venmo, at some point, just like Venmo, like you're going to be able to do the same thing with Bitcoin. You're going to be able to just have an option. Like, is it from your bank? Is it from Bitcoin? And people who invest, let's say if you have a brokerage account and you're investing, it's the same kind of thing, right? You can determine where funds go, but it's a button. It's like, is this going from, your checking account into your brokerage account? Is it going into your money market account? Is it going to your IRA? Like you're just choosing an option. So
Right.
once people realize that like Bitcoin is just an option that can store value in some way, and there's utility to it, so meaning when you go to a store and that digital payment system can take Apple Pay or Bitcoin or whatever else, and like you won't really care because it's just a balance on the ledger. So if
I
my
agree.
balance in my bank is this and my balance in Bitcoin is this, I'm just paying.
Right. So do you think that's something that'll be accelerated by COVID?
I don't. Well, yeah, yes and no. Like I think it's accelerated by COVID in terms of when we have a bailout and the government prints this much money. I think again, this was another crazy stat I heard. It said that 20% of all money ever created for our country, like American dollars, 20% of all money that's been printed and created has been done this year. Like in our whole history. Imagine it. So you go, okay, that's a pretty good argument for inflation, right? And so that part of it is way more technical because, of course, because we're the reserve currency, and other countries want to borrow in our dollars and trade in our dollars, and then other people in other countries also want to invest in our markets. It makes it harder to look at than just like, oh, this happened, so this will happen. It's super complicated, and even I don't fully understand all of that stuff. But what I can say is like, yeah, when you look at stats like that, like 1/5 of all dollars ever made it has been done in 1 year, with more to come, by the way. Like meaning, so when like when this new stimulus passes, you're going to say that's another basically $1 trillion.
I was going to ask, that's not included, huh?
No, like no, because it hasn't gone through yet. So it's like you're talking, it's gonna be 3 trillion, which is gonna probably bump that number up to a third, or I don't know. Like I mean, that's
Yeah.
a massive stat.
That is a massive stat, but I guess it makes sense. I mean, $1 trillion is a lot of money.
Yes. So now keep in mind again, our country has been a lot more productive over the years too. So $1 trillion is still relative to our productivity today or our GDP today. So, and again, we have reserve currency status. So it's a little bit skewed, but this is what I mean. Like we can always manipulate the numbers and the perception any way we want. But the reality is that like, will COVID accelerate the adoption of Bitcoin? Yes. And I think it already has, because when you look at massive companies that have gotten to the game, and this is one of the things that, kind of really sold me on it, was like, you're talking about massive investment firms, massive companies. Like, again, I mentioned PayPal and Square, but like even investors like a Paul Tudor Jones, who's like a legendary investor from like the 80s and 90s, who literally put in, hundreds of $1 millions and saying like, look, like I'm just seeing it different. And I think, around that time frame was around the same time frame I was looking at it and trying to say like, it's not just a currency. And that's the problem. I think when we call it cryptocurrency, everybody thinks of it as just a dollar or just a monetary thing. But, another guy I love listening to is a guy named Chamath Palihapitiya, and he was like a really early advocate of Bitcoin. And, the way he always broke it down was like, it's insurance, right? Like, I'm not saying you put tons of your money into it. It's like, look, I took 1% of my portfolio and put it into Bitcoin because I figured if the worst case scenario happens, I got 1% in there, like I'm fine.
Right.
He's like, but I hope nothing happens. But I think a lot of people are now starting to realize that, when governments can manipulate interest rates and print money and all these different, tools that they have at their disposal, Bitcoin has a finite amount. There's the halving events that happen. So meaning half of what was actually printed can be printed every, like, I think it's 4 years. And when you look at the utility of it, it's like basically like having gold, except it doesn't have to be a gold bar that's stored in a bank or held by some fiduciary company. It's just a digital asset that we have on a ledger that we all share.
That's interesting.
So yes and no. I think COVID accelerates it, but I think that would probably have been coming because people would have tried to understand it more and more. The more it gets adopted on your phone, right? Like, the easier it is, right? We don't remember the days where we had like layaway, like, hey, I walked into a store, right? I wanted to buy that thing. I gave them $10 and I went home. I left the thing at the store. You know what I mean? Like, we don't remember that because like it's like, oh, that's so far away. But people are doing that now online. Like, I can open a company's credit card like in the store and pay for some stuff.
Yeah.
Or start a payment plan like with companies like Affirm, right? You go on Affirm and like, hey, I want to buy that thing, and they'll give me 0 interest rate, and I can just make payments on it. Like, that's basically almost the same thing as in reverse in a sense, right? Where you're like, we're so used to that now because it's just part of technology. But
Yeah.
at some point when Bitcoin is adopted further, like, you'll get used to it. We'll all get used to it.
You're right. I think as soon as we have the ability to, complete transactions from our phone, people will adapt.
Right. Well, and also when it looks seamless, because you don't like, I mean, I don't know, this popped in my head, but like if I said to you, you walk into a store and, you have $100 in your wallet, you have your debit card and you have your credit card. Like, theoretically, that's 3 different forms of payment. Right? I can give you the cash I have right now. Yeah. I have less cash to walk around with. I can give you my debit card and just take money out of my bank, and then I have less balance. Or I can give you my credit card and then I'll just worry about that later. Like, if you just replaced even cash or something with Bitcoin, you said, okay, like it's just Bitcoin, your debit card and your credit card.
Right.
Or I had a check and I can write you a check and then I know it's coming on my debit card or my checking account, but it'll come out in 2 days or 3 days. We have that now, right? You have cash, you have a check, you have credit, you have debit. I mean, think about it. So meaning like, and then you can open new credit on the spot. Like, I can go into a, Macy's and go like, hey, I want to open your card right now to get that 15%. I mean, so if you think about Bitcoin as being just another version of that and other ones go away, like, when's the last time you wrote a check for the most part? It's like these things change. And I think human beings were so bad at like understanding time that we go like, oh, that's true. But that feels so long ago, but it really wasn't.
Good point. So you think it's coming?
I think it's here. And I think it's just like everything else. How soon do you adopt it? And how soon do you believe in the idea? And most of us tend to do it too late. I mean, I remember, again, I was a Bitcoin skeptic, and God, I don't remember what was that. Maybe it was like $600 or $500. And I was just like, nah, like, and when you look back, you would give your right arm to buy it at $500.
Right.
But at some point it was literally at $5, $1. It was at cents before, and I remember years ago, I think back in the Elixir days, it was like, we had talked to some guys that were really big into crypto, and they were all these like kind of like nerdy tech dudes who just like, oh yeah, let them play with their Dungeons and Dragons, and because you didn't understand it and we didn't get it, but all of these guys understood the ecosystem of it, and it was like, it was like dollars then, and you just didn't realize that, like, okay, well, wait a minute, like, and that's the problem, like the group of people that are early adopters and then late adopters, and then like, that shift is so massive. So meaning if the average person ends up getting into Bitcoin when it's 50,000, 100,000, and let's assume the projections that some of these people are putting out there are correct. Like, I think Kathy Wood, who's like a massive investment manager, she believes it can be 400,000 or 500,000. Chamath, the guy I was saying before, he's like a former Facebook guy who invested early. He thinks it could be $1 million. A lot of people have said, yeah, it could be $1 million at some point. I mean, if you got into it at, 50 grand, 100 grand, you'd be like, oh man, thank God. But obviously the people who got into it at, a dollar, right? It's just a
Right.
very different thing. So, and then the average person might not have 50,000 to buy a Bitcoin. So
Mhm.
but I think it's here. I just think like it'll become slowly adopted, and it's no different than, I mean, think about the people say in I don't know, Venezuela, right? When their currency was doing fine and they were a massive oil economy, and you go there now, and I don't know if you've like seen any of the news about Venezuela, but their dollars are worth basically nothing. It's like, people were burning them because it's like it's worth more to just burn it and have heat than it was to have dollars. I mean, so, and people were fleeing the country. So it's like when you see those things happen, and because we feel like that's not us, we go, oh well, that's not going to happen. But I'm not saying it will. You just don't know, and this is why we're so bad at time, because it's hard to remind ourselves that when these crises happen, yeah, the 70s and 80s feel so far away, and then the early 2000s, even for a lot of people, feel so far away. But these things can happen quickly, and I think Bitcoin will slowly be adopted more and more.
This has been The Invested Life with Adam Khalil. Subscribe, like, comment, but most importantly, share the information you learned, and share the video with a friend or someone who you think might find value from it.